It's no secret I despise the Star Wars sequels. Whenever I talk about any of these films, I'm always pessimistic. In terms of public opinion, most people liked The Force Awakens, but of course, after The Last Jedi, it has been nothing but a downward slope. Audiences delivered a poor rating for The Last Jedi, critics bashed The Rise of Skywalker, and Star Wars merchandise has been plummeting. The sequel trilogy overall is an absolute failure, and for good reason. The sequel trilogy is just garbage. I don't know how else to put it. It's just overall fucking trash. It's lifeless and dull. I don't care about the characters. It's uncreative. It panders. There's a lot of unsubtle propaganda. Worst of all, though, it ruined old characters from the original trilogy. Currently, the Star Wars franchise doesn't have the best image. The people who like The Rise of Skywalker didn't love it. At least most people. I'm sure there are a few fans out there who love the whole sequel trilogy, and that's great, but I think in terms of the majority, most people see it as a failure. While the Disney trilogy is a disastrous mess, the Star Wars franchise overall isn't terrible still. In fact, there's a lot to enjoy. When people say Disney Star Wars is bad, they are usually referring to the sequel trilogy because that is like kind of the image or the cover of the whole franchise. Which makes sense, the franchise started based off movies, and those are the products that make the most money. But what about the other movies, or TV shows, or video games? First, we will be talking about the side films. When it comes to the Disney Star Wars films outside of the sequel trilogy, they actually did a pretty decent job. Yes, Solo didn't do that great at the box office, but that's only because Last Jedi was so bad people were protesting that film. So I kind of ignore that aspect of the movie, but to me overall, the film is okay. It's not bad or good, but compared to the sequel trilogy, it is a masterpiece. Because Solo has good characters and good world building. As for Rogue One, I'm going to spend a lot more time talking about this movie because I feel like it's incredibly underrated. I mean, it's not only underrated, but it is also the best Star Wars product that Disney has released so far. Yes, even better than The Mandalorian. I mean, Rogue One is the reason why I had hope for The Last Jedi, because the film made me realize Disney has the capabilities of creating good movies. Unfortunately, Last Jedi bombed, but Rogue One is still a good movie nonetheless. Now, the main problem people have with this movie is that the characters aren't interesting, and they're boring, and the plot is kind of slow, and I can definitely see where these fans are coming from, but I still disagree. Are Rogue One's characters deep and complex? No. Are they up to par with the main cast in the original trilogy? No, but they do not need to be. To me, Rogue One is very similar to Halo Reach. If you watch a film and play the game with a different mindset and perspective, I feel like you'll have a better experience. It's more of a plot-driven, world-building story as opposed to just focusing on the characters. Both pieces of media are fantastic representations of war. It's dark and brutal, and no one side is completely moral. For example, we see Cassian shoot one of his own men in order to simply complete a mission. I do appreciate this film not holding back any punches, but what I appreciate more is the return of old characters. And that's because they handle these characters with care, and they have a reason to be in the movie. It's not like the sequels where it's just like, remember that? That was in the original trilogy. Remember the good old days when those movies were much fucking better? Rogue One doesn't have any of that shit. It has zero pointless characters and cameos. The closest thing you can get to a pointless cameo is Saw. The reason I hesitate with this is because he's not a well-known character, and even if you watch the Clone Wars, you probably wouldn't remember him. But I don't see a problem with this because it's not fan service when you're utilizing an unknown character. And I think it's great that Rogue One is adding more depth to an old character, as opposed to just adding a new one. But going back to the old characters, Grand Moff Tarkin stealing plans and taking credit for himself is definitely within his character, and adds a little more depth to him as well. He also says the famous line,
"We're far when ready."
Princess Leia is only in one scene and only says the word hope, but that's all she needs to do. That's how you do a cameo. It's not needlessly long or it's in your face, it's just one scene, barely in the movie, but it's still very powerful and impactful. It was also cool to see Bail Organa in the movie, even if it was for just a couple of seconds. But by far the best inclusion of an old character in Rogue One has to be Darth Vader. In terms of Star Wars movies, Vader has never really had a moment quite like the corridor slaughter scene. Rogue One really does these old characters justice, unlike these three films. As for the main cast, yes, they're not as deep or complex as old characters, but the film isn't about them. They only serve as a perspective of the world around them. Again, just like Halo Reach, Noble Six only serves as a perspective of the world around them. But at the same time, that's not to say that Rogue One's characters or Halo Reach's characters are completely devoid of any character. I still find these characters interesting and entertaining, but if I am going to be honest with myself, Jyn and Cassian are probably the least interesting characters on Team Rogue One. I love the other ones, K2SO, Chirrut, Baze, and Body. I thought these were really good characters. Their backstories aren't told to you up front, but you can kind of get what they've been through just based off their mannerisms and character interactions between each other. Especially Chirrut and Baze. You can tell these two characters have a lot of history together. Even the main villain, Krennic, who I thought was just going to be a pointless side character, was an excellent addition to the film and played his role very well. But with all the positive comments aside, the greatest reason towards my love for this film is the fact that it has a purpose. Again, Solo was okay, but it was definitely not necessary. Rogue One not only gives more characterization for older characters, but enhances older movies. Why did the Death Star in A New Hope have such a huge design flaw? Because a deserter contractor purposefully created a weak spot in order to help the Resistance. I think that's brilliant. Now, when it comes to video games, Disney did have an influence in EA's Battlefront 2. That includes the microtransactions and ridiculous gameplay hours for unlocking heroes. There may have been updates or whatever, but it's still a shit game. You can't update the crappy mechanics and gameplay. The campaign sucked too. There are way too many Star Wars games where the protagonist starts off as an evil person and then later joins the Resistance. Play as a villain from beginning to end. Knights of the Old Republic allows you to do this. Why can't later games? Now, Disney also created Jedi Fallen Order, and that was a success with many positive reviews. I don't think the two balance out because Fallen Order is a good game, but nothing special. Battlefront 2, on the other hand, is more than a bad game, it is a disaster. The only positive I can get Battlefront 2 is the graphics. They look incredible. But as we've learned from A Portrait of a Lady on Fire, looks aren't everything. A piece of media can look nice and great, but underneath it could be complete shit. As for TV shows, I believe Disney shines the most in this category. Doesn't mean everything they produce here is the best, but Rogue One and Solo have to balance out the sequel trilogy, and Fallen Order has to balance out Battlefront 2. This is the only category where I would give it a slightly more positive edge. Disney got very lucky having people who are very passionate about Star Wars the entirety of the franchise write for The Mandalorian. Hard to judge The Mandalorian based off just one season, but from what I've seen, it's really good. I do have a couple of flaws though. Unfortunately, one is kind of big. Again, I kind of have issues with the protagonist just like from EA's Battlefront 2. I mean, obviously Mando is a much better character, but the issue is still the same. The development of Mando going from a bounty hunter to someone with morals happens way too fast. When I'm promised a show about bounty hunters, I want to see some anti-heroes. If you want to transform as the show goes on, that's fine, but Season 1 is way too early for that type of character development. Again, it's still a very good show, but I don't think it's the best thing ever. It definitely has its rough patches, but it's still pretty solid and decent overall. Disney succeeded with this show. Alright, I haven't seen Star Wars Resistance, but I feel like I don't need to judge it. Just looking at the trailer, dislike bar, reviews, and the god-awful animation, I can say it looks like complete garbage. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. Maybe these people reviewing the show are just lying to me. And obviously this is a TV show aimed towards kids, and I fucking hate kids. They're smelly and gross, and I just don't feel like starting a TV show. Rebels is kind of a different story. I hate the main cast, the new characters suck so much, but when you see old characters from the Clone Wars, that's when the show really gets good. It's a real mixed bag. It definitely has its shining moments, but you have to go through a lot of crap just to see it. But speaking of the Clone Wars, Disney is bringing back Season 7, which I do not see failing at all. It's like George R.R. Martin in Dumb and Dumber. The content is already written for them, but this time it's completed. You have the same voice actors, the same characters, the same creators. There's no way this could fail. Overall, I believe Disney has added a lot of crap to the Star Wars franchise, but they've also added a lot of great stuff as well.